I was 11 the first time someone laughed at me for dreaming too big. The summer sun had already begun to melt into the horizon when I stepped onto Fort Ellison's parade ground, dressed in a hoodie I'd stitched with mock Velcro straps and a homemade patch that read HQ Tactical. My father, Master Sergeant Vernon Quinn, walked beside me, his uniform starched sharp, his stride steady. I held a sketchbook close to my chest, its pages filled with diagrams, notes, and a design I couldn't wait to show someone, anyone, who might take me seriously. Dad had signed us up for Family Day a week earlier. "You'll like it," he'd said with that low rumble of his. Machines, soldiers, maybe even a firing demo. But it wasn't the firepower that excited me, it was the machinery behind it. I'd been designing my own weapon concept for months. A modular rifle with an adaptive sensor array, lightweight frame, and quick-swap attachments. To others, it probably looked like a child's doodle. To me, it was a blueprint for the future. We passed rows of tents, obstacle courses, and food trucks. The air smelled like grease, gun oil, and grilled hot dogs. Music blared from a speaker nearby, and the bass buzzed with laughter and chatter. I kept scanning for someone who might be interested in my work. I wasn't naive. I knew I was just a kid in oversized boots, but I hoped someone would see past that. "Hey, Sergeant Beckett," my dad called, waving down a broad-shouldered man with a square jaw and aviators. "Got someone here with a new design to show you." Sergeant Troy Beckett looked like every war movie character rolled into one, barrel chest, buzz cut, and a face that seemed permanently unimpressed. He approached with a swagger that could level buildings. "What's this?" he asked, hands on his hips as he looked me over. "Some kind of field commander in training?" I swallowed hard and opened my sketchbook, flipping to the page with my modular rifle design. "It's an adaptive firearms system," I said, voice tight but determined. "It can switch functions in under 6 seconds. Rifle to drone launcher to short-range stun mode. I call it the MQS-3. He snorted. Loudly. Then he chuckled, and that chuckle spread like wildfire to the 2 younger soldiers behind him. "You built this," he said, tilting the book sideways. "What'd you use, Legos? Looks like something outta a video game." My cheeks burned. "I built a model using 3D printed parts and a real-time stabilization module," I added quickly. "It's in my backpack." "I could." "Let me guess," he cut in. "You put wheels on it too so it can drive to school and do your math homework?" The laughter that followed wasn't cruel, not exactly. But it was enough to make me feel like every hour I spent sketching, measuring, modeling had been a joke. The kind of laugh that tells you, without words, that you don't belong. I closed my book slowly and nodded. "Thanks for looking." My dad shot Beckett a tight glare. "Come on, Harper." As we walked away, I tried to focus on my feet. One step. Then another. Pretend the sound behind you doesn't matter. But then, as we rounded the corner of a hangar, I heard a quieter voice behind me, one of the younger soldiers, maybe my dad's age. "She's got guts," he said. "And that quick swap idea? That's actually smart." It wasn't praise. Not quite. But it was something. A glimmer. And glimmers are enough when your whole heart is tied to an idea. We spent the rest of Family Day in silence. Dad didn't push me to talk. He knew I needed space. I sat in the passenger seat of his old Jeep, thumbing the corner of my sketchbook and wondering whether I'd made a fool of myself. Whether dreaming big just wasn't for kids with scraped-up sneakers and a second-hand laptop. At home, I took the prototype out of my backpack. It was made of plastic and aluminum scraps, but it clicked together just like I planned. My hands moved without thinking, assembling it on the floor of my room. It didn't shoot anything. It wasn't even meant to. But it functioned. It adapted. It was real. And someone had said it was smart. That night I didn't cry. I should have. But instead, I pulled out a pen, opened a fresh page, and wrote in block letters at the top. Them. I wasn't done. Not even close. I didn't start building version 2 out of revenge. That would have been too easy, too shallow. What I felt after Family Day wasn't just humiliation. It was something deeper. A burning awareness that if I didn't prove my ideas could stand, I'd be letting them vanish under someone else's laughter. I couldn't let that happen. My dad never brought up what happened on the base, and I didn't either. But something shifted between us. The next day, without a word, he dropped a dusty box on my workbench in the garage. Inside were stripped-down rifle grips, discarded optics, wiring, components from gear marked for scrap. He never said where he got them. I didn't ask. I spent every afternoon in that garage, goggles fogged, fingers blackened with solder and graphite. I wasn't just sketching anymore. I was engineering, teaching myself the principles of modular architecture, frictionless mechanics, and thermal management using textbooks from the library and late-night forums full of adults who never questioned my age, only my math. At school, while other kids passed notes or whispered about who liked who, I was rewriting the firmware on an Arduino chip in the back of the computer lab. I started eating lunch alone, my tray untouched while I scribbled circuit pathways on napkins. Nobody cared what I was doing, which was fine by me. Silence made space for focus. The prototype began to take shape, sleek, efficient, real. A compact chassis of carbon composite overlays, balanced for weight distribution. A modular core that could switch attachments using magnetic rail lock. The quick swap system that Sergeant Beckett mocked? It now triggered with a silent motion sensor keyed to glove pressure. My first test was crude and clumsy, but when the attachments clicked in place like I'd imagined, I smiled. Not because it worked, because I made it work. Dad started coming home later than usual. Sometimes he stood at the garage door, watching me work without saying a word. Once, he muttered, "Looks cleaner than half the gear we carry," and left a Mountain Dew beside my elbow. That was his way of saying he was proud. I understood. I entered my prototype into the regional STEM fair that spring. I named it MQS-3, Modular Quick Switch System, Model 3. The judges were mostly local engineers and retired scientists. Some nodded with mild interest, others flipped through my presentation like they were looking for typos. One woman, a civilian defense analyst named Ms. Lindstrom, lingered. She asked real questions. What's your magnetic field tolerance? What's the failure rate under repeated swaps? She didn't smile until I gave real answers. I won first place. They handed me a framed certificate and a $500 check, which I used to upgrade my modeling software. But during the closing speech, another judge joked, "Let's just hope she grows out of designing weapons before high school." The audience chuckled. I didn't. After the fair, Ms. Lindstrom pulled me aside and gave me her card. "You should look into some of the open call innovation programs," she said. "Defense startups love ideas that push boundaries." Her voice dropped a bit, more serious. "And don't let their laughter define the room." That night, I sat on my bed cross-legged, staring at her card. The government's Future Soldier Tech Initiative had an open contest running. Submit an idea, win funding, maybe even support for R/&D. Most entries came from Ivy League grads, ex-military engineers, corporate labs. I was 13. I didn't think I had a chance. But then I remembered Beckett's voice echoing in my head. Asterisk, what did you use, Legos? Asterisk. I created a profile under the name H.Q. Designs, anonymous enough to be taken seriously, personal enough that I'd know it was mine. I recorded a short demo of the MQS-3 in action, highlighting the modularity, speed, and vision. No face, no voice. Just hands, measurements, movement. I uploaded my entry and closed the tab. Weeks passed. I almost forgot about it. Life moved on in its quiet rhythm. Garage, school, code, repeat. But something had shifted in me. I wasn't just building to prove someone wrong anymore. I was building because the idea refused to leave me alone. It lived in my fingers, in the whirring sound of my dad's old rotary tool, in the scratch of graphite on blueprint. Then, one afternoon in June, the email came. "Congratulations. Your design has been selected as a finalist for live prototype evaluation. Please confirm your attendance at the Washington, D.C. demonstration range this July. I read it twice, then a third time. Then I just stared at the screen, blinking. Dad found me an hour later, still sitting in front of the computer, unmoving. Everything all right, Harper? I turned the screen toward him. He leaned in slowly, read the message. Then he gave one short exhale, half laugh, half disbelief. You're going to D.C., he said. No, I whispered. We're going to D.C. And somewhere far in the back of my mind, I thought of Sergeant Beckett, of his voice, of that snort of laughter. I hoped he'd be there. Because this time, I wouldn't be holding a sketchbook. I'd be holding the future. The Pentagon didn't look like any place a 13-year-old belonged. It was all angles and shadows, security checkpoints and serious faces. I wore my best polo shirt and the black cargo pants I saved for science fairs, trying to look older, smarter, like someone who might belong at a live weapons systems demonstration. Dad wore his full dress uniform. He didn't say much during the drive, but he kept checking the rearview mirror like he expected the whole thing to vanish. As we crossed the final security gate, he reached over and squeezed my shoulder. Whatever happens, he said, you already won. The staging area was a secured testing range behind the Defense Research Pavilion. A concrete plaza stretched wide beneath a metal awning, with reinforced tables lined up like an open-air science fair, except these booths didn't hold baking soda volcanoes. One had a drone that folded like origami, another displayed a field exosuit with spinal reinforcement. And then there was mine. I sat up quickly, my hands steady despite the swarm of nerves in my chest. I kept my name tag flipped backward, just HQ Designs, printed in block letters on a plain stand. The MQS-3 prototype sat front and center, polished, functional, the parts gleaming under the mid-morning sun. The crowd filtered in. Engineers, military contractors, a few generals with ribbons heavy on their chests. I caught glimpses of familiar company logos: DARPA, Lockgate Systems, Horizon Tactical. No one looked twice at me. That was fine. I wasn't the story yet. Then I saw him. Sergeant Troy Beckett stood near the edge of the crowd, arms folded, sunglasses reflecting the sunlight in sharp flashes. He hadn't aged much, still square-jawed and confident, like the base had built him from spare tanks. I froze for a second, the memory of his laughter spiking in my chest like static. Let them see the work, I told myself, pushing the prototype forward an inch. The presentation began. One by one, the finalists were called forward to demonstrate their systems. Some went smoothly, some failed publicly. I watched a drone jam mid-flight and a targeting AI crash to a blue screen. There were polite claps, raised brows, whispered notes. No laughter. Then they called my number. I stepped forward, pushed the MQS-3 onto the demo platform, and took a deep breath. The voice over the intercom asked me to begin. No name. Just, HQ Designs, you're live. I tapped the activation key. The magnetic rails hummed softly. I lifted the modular rifle with both hands and ran through the drill. Standard rifle mode, click. Sniper barrel swap, click. Drone launcher assembly, click. All under 7 seconds. The observers leaned forward. I could feel the change ripple through them. Curious. Engaged. I walked to the microphone and spoke clearly. This is the MQS-3. Designed for rapid deployment in varied terrain, 0 external tools required for transformation. Light enough for airborne units, durable enough for ground forces. Trigger-locked magnetic rail system ensures secure modularity under field pressure. And the design allows integration with existing tactical gloves. No need for extra equipment. Someone in the back nodded. Another whispered to a colleague. I caught Beckett's face again. His arms were still folded, but his sunglasses were off now. He was watching. Closely. The final test was firing. I handed control to the demonstration officer, who ran the MQS-3 through a simulation using the training module, a controlled indoor firing setup with pressure sensors and modular swap detection. The machine registered every transition with perfect timing. 0 malfunctions. Silence followed. Then scattered clapping. Then more. Not polite this time. Real. One of the generals stepped forward. Tall, silver-haired, with a clean, deep voice. Impressive. Where did you learn to build this? I hesitated. Looked toward my dad. He gave a single nod. I turned back to the general and pulled off my cap. I'm Harper Quinn. I'm 13. And this design started as a sketch Sergeant Beckett laughed at 2 years ago on Fort Ellison's Family Day. The crowd shifted, confused. Then heads turned. Beckett's mouth tightened, but he didn't speak. I'm not mad about it, I added. Honestly, that laugh made me try harder. I wanted to build something no one could dismiss. Not because I'm young. Not because I'm small. But because it works. The general let out a quiet, thoughtful exhale. Well, he said, it certainly does. A few moments later, the lead contractor from Horizon Tactical requested a private demonstration. A woman in a dark blazer handed me a business card with a gold eagle embossed into the corner. Behind them, Beckett stepped forward. Just a few paces. He looked at the MQS-3, then at me. His eyes didn't carry the same mockery anymore. He didn't say anything. Just nodded once and stepped back. I hadn't come to embarrass him. I didn't need revenge. I just needed the work to speak louder than the memory. And now it had. The contract came through 6 months later. At first, I thought it was a scam. An official envelope stamped with a federal seal, delivered to our mailbox like it was any other letter. But inside was a formal notice from the Department of Defense, co-signed by Horizon Tactical and the Army's Advanced Systems Division. The terms were simple. Licensing rights to the MQS-3, 100,000 units scheduled for deployment over the next 3 years, and a 5-year consulting agreement with HQ Designs, me. I stared at the paper so long I forgot to breathe. Dad was in the kitchen, brewing his second cup of coffee, when I dropped the envelope in front of him. He picked it up slowly, read each word, then read them again. His hand trembled just slightly as he lowered the page. They really want it? He asked, voice cracked. I nodded. They want all of it. For a long second, he didn't say anything. Then, in a voice lower than I'd ever heard it, he muttered, You did what I couldn't even dream of. I didn't know what he meant by that. Maybe it was about more than the design. Maybe it was about being heard. Everything changed after that. A press release went out naming HQ Designs as the youngest defense innovation partner in U.S. history, though they were careful not to highlight my age too much. A quiet buzz grew around the story. The anonymous finalist who turned out to be a teenage girl with no formal education, just grit and blueprint. I didn't go viral. I didn't need to. I got a workshop. Real, this time, inside Horizon's R/&D facility. I still kept my garage at home, though. It smelled like melted plastic and effort. I liked that smell. It reminded me who I was before they all started listening. The real surprise came the following spring, when Dad and I were invited to Fort Ellison for a recognition ceremony. I hadn't been back since Family Day. The base looked the same. Chain-link fences, low hum of distant training drills, the distinct blend of heat and old asphalt. I wore a simple gray jumpsuit with the HQ Designs patch stitched on the chest. They gave me a temporary visitor badge, though everyone already knew who I was. We stood on the same parade ground where I'd once clutched my sketchbook like armor. Rows of soldiers were assembled, some holding the newest batch of MQS-3 units fresh off the line. Watching them lock modules into place in perfect rhythm was surreal, like watching my own imagination move without me. That's when I saw him again. Sergeant Beckett. He was waiting off to the side, hands behind his back. The crowd parted naturally around him, not out of fear, just out of familiarity. He looked older. Not weaker, just more weathered. His eyes found mine immediately. He stepped forward and extended a hand. Quinn. I hesitated, then shook it. His grip was firm, not performative. I saw the rollout specs, he said. Cleaner than half the junk the big firms have been pushing for years. I shrugged, trying to keep my voice even. Guess it all started with that laugh. His expression tightened just slightly. Yeah. About that. He looked off to the side for a moment, like collecting words from the air. I was wrong. I treated you like a joke when I should have treated you like a mind. I'm sorry. I blinked, unsure what to say. He didn't wait for absolution. Just added, it's easy to mock what you don't understand. Harder to admit when it turns out you were looking at the future. We stood there in silence as soldiers moved around us, assembling and disassembling my design like it was just another tool of the trade. But I knew it wasn't. Not to me. You were part of the process, I said, finally. Wouldn't have version 2 without that day. He nodded once and stepped back. The apology, real and unadorned, lingered longer than the conversation. Later, during the ceremony, General Raleigh Stone presented me with a commemorative plaque and a folded flag, thanking me for contributions to tactical innovation and modern battlefield adaptability. My name was etched into a program next to full-fledged defense contractors and former military scientists. Afterward, Dad and I stood by the edge of the airstrip, watching a helicopter lift off under a setting sun. He sipped from a paper cup and said, "You know what the best part is?" "What?" "You never needed anyone to believe in it. You believed in it enough for the rest of us." I thought about that as I looked across the tarmac, wind tugging at my sleeves, the hum of blades fading into the sky. I wasn't angry anymore. Not at Beckett. Not at the judges. Not at anyone who failed to see what I saw. They had their chance to laugh. Now they carried what I built into the field. And I was just getting started.